Having the
Here at UrbanArias, we pride ourselves on timely and relevant offerings. That's why.
Welcome everybody. It is just 6:30, so I'm going to vamp for a little bit while we have some more folks joining us. But mostly, I just want to kick it off and say thank you to everyone who has watched our interviews as part of the UrbanArias sampled series, something new that we've started this year. One of the many gifts of the pandemic that people in our industry and many industries are discovering new ways to connect with our audiences that we would never have thought of if we were just going about business as usual. So over the past 3 weeks, we've taken some time with all the many hands and artistic spirits and souls that have gone into making this amazing film that we released on Friday. And I just realized I forgot to introduce myself. I think it's right there on Zoom, but my name is Anne Carolyn Bird, and I am proud to be the executive director of UrbanArias, based in Arlington, and now reaching out all over the country thanks to the pandemic. I'm thrilled to be here today with all of the, almost all of the people that we've interviewed over the past 3 weeks as part of this series. One of our most important creative minds is not here, couldn't be with us tonight, but she's here with us in spirit. And we'll mention her when we get to our introductions. My hope for this hour is just conversation. We want to talk about the film, about the process, but we have touched on those things already a little bit in the past 3 weeks of interviews. And so today we're adding a new layer, a new level. We have brought in two wonderful people who are friends of mine, one new and one a few years old, who have, not only have they not seen the film, they didn't have anything to do with making the film. We are bringing them in as outsiders who are very familiar with the subject of the film. Jennifer Bowman and Whitney Kernodle, they will introduce each other as we move forward. But I'm so pleased and proud that they are here. So I'm going to turn it over to my fellow panelists to take turns introducing each other so that you don't just have to listen to me talk for 20 minutes. The first pair we saw 3 weeks ago in our first interview called Making the Opera. We have the composer, Susan Kander, and the librettist, Roberta Gumbel, and I'm going to let them take it away. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. Roberta Gumbel, but I have the privilege of introducing Susan Kander, the composer of DWB, and I'm going to read it so that I don't stumble. I get to introduce Susan from 3 unique perspectives. As a composer, a friend, and a collaborator. The first is Susan as a composer. I sang her music long before I knew her. I was asked to sing a commission that Kansas City Lyric Opera had done of her show Never Lost a Passenger on Harriet Tubman. And I had the occasion to call her to ask her about a few lines in the piece, which she very graciously changed for me. Later, I sang other chamber works of hers, both in Merkin Hall and Carnegie Recital Hall, and eventually I recorded her extended song cycle. Susan's a prolific composer and has had works commissioned by the Opera Theater of St. Louis, Minnesota Opera, Opera Columbus, and the Lyric Opera of Kansas City, as well as the National Symphony. Her music has been played on 6 continents. And most recently, she's got a newly published album of art song for voice and piano. She is a force. Along the way, Susan and I became good friends. And I actually knew and respected her father long before I knew Susan. So I knew she was good people. Now she's the friend I stay with when I visit New York City. She has 2 amazing grown sons, equally successful, an adoring and supportive husband, and a very sweet grandchild. The third perspective is our friendship led to our collaboration. She'll tell you that she usually does a solo act. She'd never worked with a librettist before. But our dinner conversations around her table in New York led to this project. We talked about my growing fears of the imminent occasion of my son driving while Black. He was 15, I think, or so at the time when we began these conversations. And it struck a nerve, and she said, this has to be our next project, or our first project together. She convinced me to write the libretto and guided me in the writing process because she is in fact a professional writer herself. But most importantly, she wrote for my voice. In this film, you won't hear my voice, you'll hear the wonderful Karen Slack. But originally she wrote it for my voice, and rarely does a singer get to sing her own words, let alone be a part of the whole process. So that is Susan Kander.
Well, thank you. All that stuff about being friends and all that history is totally true, and my great good fortune. I also am going to read because I'm old-fashioned. Roberta and I have worked together over the past 25 years, starting, as she said, at the Lyric Opera of Kansas City, where she created the title role of Harriet Tubman in an opera called Never Lost a Passenger. That's where I first fell in love with her voice and her stage presence, and where we began a friendship that became one of the most important in my life, and that was long before we embarked on writing this opera together. Roberta has sung everything from Mozart to Marsalis. She's performed in opera houses and Broadway houses and at Jazz at Lincoln Center. She sang the role of Clara, the brand new mother who sings Summertime at the very beginning of Porgy and Bess in all the great opera houses all over the world. She is the voice, hers is the voice in my ear when I set text, and I set text a lot. I love to set text. Roberta is a stage animal. She knows the nuts and bolts of how theater works, like the back of her hand. She knows how performers perform, both as individuals and as part of an ensemble. And she knows how performers engage with their audience. And all this gives her a tremendous intuition and insight into writing and shaping stories for the theater. Though she's new to being on the creative end of opera, she is a punctilious, expressive, highly specific writer who chooses words that sing, which is an uncommon gift to a composer. She imagines both the whole dramatic arc of a story and the minute details of a single emotional beat. I have to mention that Roberta's son, who is the whole reason we arrived at writing DWB 4 years ago, is truly one of the coolest kids on the planet, which is a quote from the opera. She teaches on the voice faculty at University of Kansas School of Music, and I'm thrilled that we're continuing our partnership on a new project.
Thank you both. That was just wonderful. I don't use this word often, but we are so blessed to have you and your relationship here as part of this experience. It's been really special for me. I am also going to get my dictionary and look up the word punctilious after our interview ends. I think I know, but I want to make sure. So thank you, that was wonderful, and also way better than anything I could have done. So thank you all for going with this. This is really wonderful. Now we're going to turn to the second group of people, actually combining 2 and 3. The second interview was Making the Music, where we talked with Bob Wood, the founder, and sorry, I get ADHD, too many distractions. The founder and artistic director of UrbanArias and my partner in crime in all these things. We have the beautiful Karen Slack and her amazing voice and amazing presence She is the star of our show and just a wonderful person to have in our family of UrbanArias. Then in the third week, we had such a lovely conversation with our filmmakers. This was making the film. Camry and Dubois Akin, a husband and wife powerhouse dynamic duo. Camry sadly can't be here with us tonight, but we're so pleased to have Dubois. And so I'm going to turn it over to Bob to start, and we'll kind of do a little round robin here and see where we go.
Sounds great. Thanks, Anne Carolyn. It's great to be here. I would also like to give Anne Carolyn a special introduction and shout out. We, as viewers may know, UrbanArias has been around for 10 years, and the first 10 of those were without an executive director. And boy, are we glad to have one. So she's fantastic, and it's such a pleasure to be working with her. And we can do things like this now because we have the bandwidth to set it up and execute it. It's my great pleasure to introduce Karen Slack, the wonderful, renowned soprano who has sung everywhere: the Met, San Francisco, the Lyric, Washington National Opera, and now UrbanArias. So now that's the feather in her cap. Karen is enjoying a remarkable career right now. She has her debut at the Met was Louisa Miller. She sings a lot of Verdi. She's done a lot of those heroines. She's done Trovatore, Traviata, she's done Aida. Most recently, I think at Austin Opera. But in addition to all of her wonderful singing, she is also now taken on a position at the Portland Opera as their artistic advisor, is that right? And also helping organize and run the Banff program. So she's taken a big step into administration, for which I say, God bless you. When I took my step into administration, obviously I still conduct, but when I made that journey, I had a lot more sympathy for all the people I've been working for. So if you're watching tonight, this is me being grateful. Karen and I met just a few years ago at the Santa Fe Opera when she was a young artist there and I was on the music staff during a production of Elektra. I think is my first memory of this. She was the Schleppträgerin, which is the train bearer, as two lines, which are always the easiest things to mess up, right? And she nailed it every time. So those roles are in many ways, they present their own unique challenges, just like big roles like Aida. So thank you for coming, Karen, and thank you for doing this project. It's been great working with you.
Thanks, Bob. I was telling Bob when he called me, I'm like, well, dang it, finally you called me. I've been wanting to work with UrbanArias literally, since the founding, because I always loved the creativity and the innovation that came out of UrbanArias. You were doing the thing before a lot of people were doing the thing. So bravo to you. I mean, over 25 contemporary works, right? Lots of world premieres that, putting, there you go. Putting, then unknown composer librettist duos on the mat, I always remember Bob being this like warm spirit, handsome face, of course, always, and I'm always looking at, at that part, but just warm spirit, wonderful. So I think may have coached a couple times, but I admire artists and who really embody the art form, the creative part, the artistic part, just innovative in every way. And so I always look forward to seeing Bob and working with Bob more, of course, in the future. And yeah, you said all the things, Bob. So well, I'm gonna turn it over to Dubois, my lovely, amazing, incredible now partner in crime, I guess, in a way. But take it away, Dubois.
Yes, yeah. So I'm so grateful to be here, Dubois Akin. My wife, in her absence, is really the most brilliant of our little duo. She's a true Renaissance Renaissance spirit, a scientist, an artist, a fashion designer. She does it all. When she's not doing research in the lab at NYU, she's like telling me how to make a good idea practical and real in the world. So she's phenomenal and brilliant. So just shout out to her, Camry Akeen. And Karen Slack. I mean, what cannot be said about Karen Slack? She's the most generous spirit I've ever met in the opera world. And I'm so grateful that we got a chance to work together initially on Charlie Parker's Yardbird in Arizona. And that just became such a catalytic experience for me as an artist. I was primarily working as a dance artist, choreographer at the time. And, and the way that Karen operates, she's just like, oh, you got something. Let me take you under my wing, and just like help you bring more of that to the world. And she's absolutely done that. And her, Camry, myself, and another friend, Joshua, who was playing the title role of Charlie, all sat down at dinner. We were like, okay, so what are the 100 things we're going to work on together in the next 10 years? Because it was just such a profound connection of kindred spirits. And so I'm so grateful to have had this opportunity to steward such a profoundly timely and resonant and important work, to bring it from the ether into the earth realm. So thank you, Karen, for the push and the invitation. Thank you, Bob, and then Carolyn for your space and generosity. Thank you, everyone else on the panel. I'm so grateful to be here. So yeah, I'm excited about the conversation.
Well, great, excellent. And now we are here in the present, in our fourth week, the final chapter, where we are now introducing two new voices. And we are calling this episode of Sampled, Making an Impact. And I am so honored to have our guests with us here today. Jennifer Bowman is a former colleague of mine from the Kennedy Center, where she is the Director of Music Education. She and I just got to have a little social meetup yesterday for about 2 minutes. We exchanged plants. Oh, yes, it was lovely. We'll talk more about plants and self-care and all that later on. And then Whitney Kernodle, who is coming to us from the country of Colombia, where she is, I believe, with her family.
My family went home.
Even better. I mean, no offense to my lovely family. I know my husband is watching right now in Seattle, but that's amazing. I'm glad you had some time with your family, and now you're in beautiful Colombia, just enjoying yourself. That is great. Whitney is a founding member of a group called Black Parents of Arlington, which she founded. Well, I'll let you all talk about that. And also Arlington for Justice. And so take it away, Jennifer and Whitney.
Thank you. And
oh no, Whitney's already unmuted. Go ahead.
I was already unmuted. That's part of the Zoom laws, right? No, but I think, number one, I'm so happy and feel privileged to be here. I don't know Jennifer very well, but the little bits of ways that I've been able to interact with her have been exceptional for me. So I think it's, again, a privilege and honor not only to be here, but to be able to introduce someone who I think I just really want to get to know better. And I think that this is a really wonderful space to be able to do some really good activism and good work. So Jennifer is the Director of Music Education at the Kennedy Center. She's responsible for developing education performances and programs in collaboration with the National why is that always such a hard word? Symphony Orchestra, Washington National Opera, and the Kennedy Center's hip hop, jazz, and chamber music programs. She's also the Kennedy Center's program lead for the Andrew Mellon Foundation, Baltimore, Washington Musical Pathways. In addition, she's recently co-led Music Academy of the West 2020 transition to a fully online summer program due to the global pandemic. She continues to work as a programming consultant for the organization. She's a native of Houston, Texas. She currently lives in Alexandria, Virginia, And what I love just about connections is that Jennifer was an undergraduate at Dartmouth College, while my husband actually shared the same space in a school that doesn't have a lot of Black voices and faces and spaces. But she was at Dartmouth for her undergraduate degree, and then she went to Johns Hopkins for her master's. And so being in education and dealing with education is obviously right up her alley for someone who's incredibly well educated. So.
Wow. Whitney, that was great. Thank you so much. And I completely agree with you. It's going to be a pleasure getting to know each other and working with each other. I really enjoyed the conversation that we were able to have with Ann Carolyn before. And we should give a shout out to Aniko Quinana, who was our mutual colleague who really brought us together for that conversation, even though she can't be here with us. So I'm really happy to be here to introduce to all of you Whitney Kernodle, who is a busy woman. She's an attorney, a political strategist, co-founder and president of Black Parents of Arlington, and she's a co-founder and steering committee member of Arlington for Justice. She currently serves on Arlington's Human Rights Commission, Police Practices Work Group, the County Council of PTAs, and Advisory Council on Teaching and Learning. She is the primary host of a weekly Facebook Live chat regarding racial and social justice issues called Let's Talk Tuesdays, which is streamed on the Arlington for Justice page. Whitney earned her BA from Temple University and her JD from the University of Pennsylvania, where she was an editor on the Journal of International Law. She is also the CEO of Global Goddess Enterprises, and that was born out of Whitney's passion for human rights, travel, and immersive cultural experiences. She's multilingual with excellent command and highly proficient in spoken and written Spanish and French. And Global Goddess leverages Whitney's experience and understanding of language and the law and how to travel to various cultures based on her background and experience. She lives with her husband and 2 teenage sons in the courthouse neighborhood of Arlington. And I don't know when she sleeps, but I'm really happy that she's here with us now.
That is so excellent. Whitney, I knew you were an amazing busy lady, but now I'm even more impressed. And I want to know all about Global Goddess, and we will talk about that at another time. That is really excellent. So thank you all. That was so fun getting to know you all a little bit more and getting to see your relationships and how you met and how you are growing together as people and friends and artists. And so another thing, actually, I'm realizing that I'm making this sound like I just didn't want to do any work for this event, because now I'm going to tell everyone that I asked our panelists to come up with questions to ask each other. And I did this not because I don't want to work, because I love my job, but because I didn't want this to be a panel about an opera called Driving While Black and talking about the arts and social justice, being led by a middle-aged white woman who's just going to talk and ask questions that I think are important. So I asked all of our panelists to come up with questions for each other. I have added 1 or 2 that we'll kind of throw in as we go along. And we encourage you, if you are watching, if you've had a question that was something that came to you while you watched one of our earlier interviews, or if someone says something today that you want to know more about, or you have another question about, please put it in the chat, drop it in the chat, like they say, and we are monitoring that, and we'll definitely have time to take questions and just kind of dive in and see what we can learn and listen and share today. So we're going to start talking about the film itself, the opera itself, the process. So Susan had a question for Bob. Susan, would you like to read your question for Bob? Oh, can you unmute?
Susan, you're muted.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I'm not an old hand at this.
That's okay.
I'm just an old hand. By the way, I want to tell you, Ann Caroline,
Yes,
when
please.
you said that you're a middle-aged person, I would like to tell you that in our family, our sons have schooled us to believe that no matter how old we are, middle age is 15 years more.
Right.
Oh, I like that approach.
Okay, so
Okay.
just
Okay.
take that. Just take that.
Well, I decided this year that middle age doesn't have anything to do with actually how old you are. It's about being in the middle. Like, I'm in the middle of everything.
Yes.
Parents, children, work, self, marriage, all this amazing stuff. So anyway,
Right.
but thank you. I will keep that.
It's gospel in our house.
I love it.
Okay, so this is a question for Bob. Was there a difference for you as a conductor? And you've already sort of mentioned this, I think, in the past, conducting to an audio track, and this is also for Karen, on her end of it, singing to an audio track, and doing it presumably in pieces, then how you would conduct if you were doing an opera all the way through, one, and an opera with living, breathing people breathing behind you in a room. So what does that do to your mind and your conducting and your heartbeat?
Sure, that's a great question. We for the audience that's watching this who don't know, this was basically a two-step process. We recorded the audio portion of it with Karen and the two instrumentalists, Rosanna Butterfield, who plays the cello, and Eric Plawinski, who plays percussion, in a studio in Tacoma Park back in February. So that part of it was all us. Doing a recording is different from a live performance, obviously, and one of the big ways in which it's different is that you can get really very fixated on making everything perfect, which you can't do when you're doing it live because you're moving on. So I've done recordings before, and it's important to be able to embrace what's useful about that mindset, but not get bogged down by it. One of the things that I thought was tricky for this was that we were recording it to be lip synced to later on a film set, which meant that the tempo choices we had to be satisfied with, not just in the moment, but also with staging that we didn't know what it was going to be yet because we couldn't change it. Also, there are a number of spoken lines in this piece, and that was a trick too, because we had to figure out how to say them, how to phrase them, the tone and all of that kind of stuff, again, without a lot of information about how it was going to look. And so we wanted to make choices that we were going to be happy with a month later. So that was a key. When we got to the film set in New York a month later, we were playing the audio as we were filming it, as you say, in pieces, section at a time, jumping all over the place. And there, my conducting was really what many people probably think conducting always is, which was just being a traffic cop. I was just helping Karen make entrances based on what she had done. She was very helpful in her original recording, though, because she breathed in a way that we could all hear. So it was easy for her to come in the right spot. But in terms of not having an audience in the recording studio, in the film set, it's a real challenge because we're used to that feedback, whether it's, and I'm not just talking about applause or laughter or snoring, but also things, just the energy in the room, excuse me. And you can feel it. You can feel, especially in smaller theaters, we perform usually in black boxes, but even in a big theater too, you can feel the energy of the audience behind you. And you're responding to that in very subtle ways as you go. And there was none of that. So it's wonderful because it's permanent, but it's not as much fun because there's not that, dynamic to it where there's a back and forth.
Yeah, it's work.
Yeah, well, let me tell you, it's always work.
Well, yeah, but true. But I think it's a different kind of work. And
Yeah.
For both the singers and the instrumentalists, my experience, which is probably not as much as yours, is that it's a completely different, you have to, I imagine that you have to be thinking in a kind of different language.
You have to think more, I think, of the expression and the phrase, because the impulse to emote is always there, but if you have feedback from an audience that you can feel or even see, it's different. I mean, Karen may have a different opinion on this, but I feel like it is really hard to sing, play, conduct your heart out, and then have it all land with a thud in the rehearsal studio because there's nobody there.
Right.
Dubois, do you want to speak a little bit? I know that very early, before we went to the recording studio, you and Bob and Karen had a phone call where you talked about, you kind of tried to make some decisions that would set you all up for working on the film set. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, thank you, and Carolyn. Yeah, even prior to that call with Karen and Bob and I had a call where we kind of talked through what were some of the emotional states or choices or expressions that that would help us land the way we were wanting to tell the story, which was going to be different than the live version. And again, like he said, we weren't exactly early on most clear about every different scenario or every different scene or each scene, but we did have a point of interest in terms of how we thought, particularly the spoken word moments, or spoken word, the spoken language would be phrased, or like where is she when she's saying this, or who is she talking to when she's saying certain things. And I don't want to give too much away because you have to see the film, but yeah, so we made choices early on about that. And then when we had the call with Karen obviously is just an incredible student of the craft as well, so she's asking probing questions about, like, okay, well, what are you thinking here in terms of how this woman is showing up, or why is she saying it this way, or are you feeling this, because this is what I'm thinking. And so, we were able to kind of bounce around and find the best place to land before the recording.
That's great. Susan, you had your question segues well into your question for Karen as well.
Yeah. The unanticipated challenges of COVID included, for singers like you who are used to big rooms and trained to do your thing, the unlooked for challenges were having to actually completely reinvent yourself as a person who sings in a recording studio into a microphone. And so I would be really interested to hear what you have to say about that. That's one part. And as you've partly answered my question, when you were recording, did you have any pictures or images or ideas, scene by scene, of what it would look like, where you were, who you were addressing, or what was going on in the film as you made the audio recording, or were you flying pretty much free of that?
Well, interestingly enough, many of us have been singing to our phones and singing to our computers and doing all these things that we've never really had to do before. So by the time we landed to the recording in early 2021, I was pretty seasoned, like mentally, into recording. I mean, I've done some recording in my career, and I know recording is very difficult. Recording an album, recording songs, no matter what kind of voice you have, because it's the over and over, the process of doing it over and over and over again and landing every note and, all of the things. But it was a challenge. It's this, I think many of us are going to have to go back and really redo a part of our technique, trying to shift back into singing in the larger space, right? And singing the bigger repertoire, because the requirements are very different. I don't care what anybody says. Everyone can always say, oh no, I sing with my one voice. No, you don't. It's just not, when you're doing new works and how new works are written, it's different. It's different than traditional bel canto. So like, it is a challenge, but I'm thankful that this project landed when it did in the time that we were doing it. You know, Dubois and I had already heard about DWB because Roberta had sent me a couple of snippets asking, I think when you guys were creating it, she sent me the lullaby. I don't know if Roberta even remembers that, and was asking me, what do you think, about certain things. So I was familiar with the piece and of course the subject matter, not being a mother myself, but of course being a daughter. And I have been steeped in new works and creating roles, telling Black women's stories. Most of my new works are all black women. So this fell right in line for what I had already been doing with Champion, Fire Shut Up in My Bones, which I premiered last season, Yardbird, Margaret Garner. And so it was a natural fit for me dramatically, but never in this kind of time period. I've never done a role that was so close to the bone as this piece in this time period. So I have to say, Bob and I had some talks. I was like, about the Black trauma, Dubois, when I first sent the piece to Dubois, I said, well, Bob sent me this piece. I just wanted to send this to you. I'm not going to tell you anything. Just look at it, listen to it. And then the next question was the Black trauma question. And like, are we really doing this right now? And then Bob and I and Dubois had to have that kind of conversation and make decisions about how we were going to move forward. Never even thinking that we would be in the midst of the trial, the Floyd trial, 2 or 3 more murders at this point. So, I had to make a decision about, I just had to make a lot of choices as an artist, as a woman, as all kinds. And I even told Bob, I don't know if I can do this. Can we just push it back? Can we push it back? Because, but he was like, no, we got to do the thing. So I had to be the artist that I am, which is tell the story, do the work, step away, Karen, and step into the telling the story.
Yeah, Karen, I don't think any of us realized when we started working on this project, when Bob decided to program it 2 years ago, that it would be premiering in the middle of an epidemic. We're in a pandemic, a global health pandemic, but we are also in an epidemic of just intrajudicial murder of Black people just living their lives. There was a time 2 weeks ago when I wondered if we should put out the piece, but we are. But it does, your statement about Black trauma. This is the first conversation I remember having with Dubois, and it ties directly to Roberta's question. I'm sorry, I'm looking at my notes. Roberta and Karen both had questions for Dubois about where the concept came from. So Roberta, would you ask your question of Dubois about the question you had for him? And let's go there. Unmute yourself first. There we go.
I don't have my script in front of me, but I sort of remember the gist of my question. I hope I don't rephrase it in a way that throws the question in a different direction. The direction you took with this film is very different than the direction we took when we produced it and did it a year or so ago. And so I'm wondering, and if you haven't seen the film, then you don't know what I'm talking about, but what were your thoughts and your hopes by adding so many elements that were not originally in the piece? The score is exactly the same, the music didn't change, but by adding the different elements visually, and in the original version, there's only one person on stage. And now there's more than one person on stage. I'm speaking in code so people don't get any ideas.
I think we can just say the D word. There are dancers.
There are dancers in it. Okay, great. So what were you thinking those dancers and the costuming and that kind of thing that you chose? How did that play in changing the concept? Because you definitely turned what we did on its side. The words speak for themselves, but you really came at it from a different direction. So what was your thought process in getting to that?
Yeah, as I speak from my I will preface it by saying I is myself and Camry. So a lot of the ideas are shared, or are cultivated between the two of us, and then we kind of come at it. But basically, as a storyteller, my responsibility, or my ideology around being a storyteller, is asking the work, what does it need? Asking the work, what does it want to say? Like, how can I best steward the work in a way that will help amplify or highlight, or maybe get at something that hasn't been gotten at before, and you all did such an incredible job in creating this work, you and Susan, Roberta, you and Susan, in that I feel that you created something that still left room for exploration and innovation. I'm not sure if my connection is strong, but yeah. So basically, what we did, to your point, is we and I use this, like you just said, none of the lyrics changed, none of the music changes, the exact same composition, but we rewrote it. We took that libretto and we rewrote it as a screenplay to see the different scenes, to break it down in kind of screenplay format, to see what else could be excavated, out of the framework or the foundation that you all had set. So in terms of, I know early on, in terms of the costuming and kind of art direction in general, Cameron was very keen about wanting to tell a story of a modern woman. And Karen spoke to this. This is a woman who we know. We see her. This is our auntie. This is our mothers, our sisters, our close friends. Like, this is a woman we know. This isn't back in the day, 50 years ago. This isn't during a time of segregation. This is now in real time. And so that was some of the choice, to really push that envelope. And then also, not to give too much away, but to amplify the state of being Black in America, and I think in the world at this point, can feel very surreal, can feel very out of body, can feel very like there's this grappling of like, am I crazy, or did they really just do that? So we wanted to play into that irony. We wanted to hold that up to the audience and say, isn't this kind of bizarre? And ask those questions to probe audience. So all of our choices around kind of our aesthetic choices in terms of art direction were toward that end. And then finally, with regards to the dancers, as a retired dancer, I like to joke. That's one of my first languages. That's one of my first modes of communication. And so I see the world in choreography. When I'm going through New York City and people are bopping around, during the pandemic, and we're navigating how close we can be to each other, all of that is choreography to me. Every physical gesture is choreography to me. And so, so I always see, no matter what story I'm telling, no matter what mode I'm working in, even as a singer, as a director, I'm always like, what's the movement? What's the movement vocabulary that helps push the story forward? And I think there's something about embodiment that is very visceral. And, by creating those kinds of resonant images for audience, it helps to tell the story a little bit better. So.
That's great, Dubois. Thank you. A bit of connection that we learned in our first interview when talking with Susan and Roberta. Susan shared that when she writes music, she sees choreography in her head. In the interview, we didn't really have time to go into that, but I would love to hear more about that. And I would love to know, you have seen the film, Susan, and I've been dying to ask you, and I know I've shared this with Dubois as well. I'd love for the two of you to talk about it together if you can. Did he get it? Did he get the choreography that was in your head? Tell me more about that.
Well, that's not a I can't address that
Maybe
question.
that's not a fair question. I
One
understand.
person's choreography is another person's, oatmeal. I don't know. It was choreography, and it was wonderful to see the music architecturally. That was really, really wonderful. And I love that it makes Dubois think in terms of choreography and space and people and bodies and gesture and all of that stuff. So I was thrilled that there was going to be dance in it. Thrilled. So thank you for that.
That's great. That's wonderful. We're going to kind of move on from the process and the film. Any lingering questions? Oh, actually, we did have a question from a viewer, a question for Karen, kind of along the same lines of the challenges of singing in film versus on a large stage. How did you learn this during the pandemic when you couldn't just go to your friend, the coach, and repetiteur the notes for hours on end? Talk a little bit about that process and how it was different from what you usually do.
Oh my God, I need a drink of wine on that, because Susan wrote those notes out of nowhere, child. And there's percussion and cello, and then the cello comes in and you're like, Lord Jesus, am I singing the right note? Yes, ma'am. It was all of those things. And because I could not sit in my coach's living room and work it out, and I endlessly listened to Roberta sing it endlessly, literally. I think every view on YouTube is mine, just listening to it over and over and over again, trying to process it. And and of course, this was not the only thing that I was learning. Everything I've learned this season is brand new. I was supposed to do La Voix Humaine, and I just did not have the bandwidth to learn that and this. And what else have I just did the, another piece with the symphony and just so many things. So that was also another challenge, was that I was just learning so many new pieces. And this is not a chunk, chunk, soar over a line, and so it was complicated. But once I got it, I got it. I was even surprised how good the recording, shout out to the recording engineer and Bob. I mean, my God, I was like, I can't even believe it's me, because I could never just relax, and because again, coming from the traditional operatic world, even with new works, even when I'm doing like Terrence's piece, which lends itself more traditional operatic, because he scores for film, so it's different. And to come from a real chamber music where I've had experience doing it, but not a lot, it was a challenge. It really was. I was just always like, please God, let me in the right key, or even the rhythms and all of the things. But very rewarding. I mean, I remember going, oh God, I'll pay so much money to coach this thing, because I would be coaching virtually too. So I was just, which is again not the same as sitting in a living room and then having to, sit and bang out the notes, of course. And anyway, it was, I am just so humbled and grateful that it came out as well as it did. I even told Bob, I said, I think it sounds too pretty. I even told him in the video, I said, it sounds too pretty. Like, it needs another layer of, and that could probably come from live performance. Like, I was talking to my agent and she's like, oh, you think you want to do it again? And, and like, what would that look like? And I was like, I'd like to get the chance to do it again, to add add that extra layer to it. You know what I mean?
That would make us very happy.
Well, we've been talking about it, so because I would think, yeah. Anyway, and we were talking about it, but like the idea of just doing it again, because I worked so hard, and it was swift how we worked, Bob. I mean, it was swift. Got in 2 days, 3 days, whatever it was,
Yeah, we recorded it in 2.5 days. Everything is, I mean, we were also doing it during COVID, so we had to be careful that we were, it was already something to get the people together in a room. And
there was a blizzard.
That's right, yes.
Yes.
For those of you who live in Washington, we recorded it the week that we got all the snow, so.
Yeah, but yeah, again, it was a challenge, but very rewarding. You know, when you're crying at the piano and then you look back months later, it's rewarding.
Roberta, did you have something you wanted to say?
No, I was just going to brag a little bit and just tell Karen, when we did it, we had no conductor. We did the whole thing without a conductor, and it is a killer piece. I totally agree with you. And I would say to Susan, what were you thinking? This is so hard. So, but it is rewarding because once you learn it, it just kind of makes sense and it suddenly becomes singable. But when you first get it, it's a lot of black and white figures on the page, but
Yeah, I don't know how many times how can I tell how I was like, oh God, am I gonna get this thing? But anyway, yes.
But the net result, Karen, is fantastic.
yeah, you
Yeah.
sound great.
Spoiler alert, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
We can't wait for people
Yeah.
to hear it and see it and experience it starting this weekend.
Thank you for all that blood, sweat, and tears.
Yes. Karen, you had a question for Jennifer. Do you have that there?
I do. Jennifer, good to see you. I just saw you last week, right? I think we just saw you
At
on
the backstage brunch.
Yes, we sure did. I owe you an email. We see this happening in popular music and other art forms like film and music theater, but how can classical musicians and artists play a more important role in social justice movements?
Yeah, I really look forward to what Whitney's thoughts will be on about this as well. But I think that so many musicians, classical musicians, we live in the world, and we see what's around us. And just being able to make connections with people who are already doing the work when a social justice cause or just the action feels really difficult and kind of unknown to us, just to be able to lean on the experts who are already doing it and figuring out what are those things that we have at our disposal that are valuable to a movement. Because sometimes we think we're gonna go take a song and sing it and woohoo, like the world's gonna change. And maybe that's not the truth, but finding out from activists and people like Whitney who work in the sphere already and to see what they need, I think it's like the biggest thing that we can do, because you're so talented, Karen, Roberta, Susan, everyone here. As artists, you have so many talents that go beyond even what folks will see for the film, but it's just figuring out like what can you do with your talents, your time, your privilege, the power that you do have relative to other people that can be of assistance to a movement.
And I'll quickly just jump in. I think I didn't ask really the question I really wanted to ask, but since we're having a conversation, I'm going to go for it. Because of the nature of the kind of art that we make in classical music, that is rooted very much in white supremacy. And then there are those of us who are in positions of power, in positions of leadership, and being asked to step into like what your opinion is, give our opinions, whatever. And we are having to navigate and juggle the fact that any one comment could be taken in a way that could strip you of everything you've worked for. Now we're in a unique time right now where there is a little bit of leverage, right? You have the leverage, you can say the things to a point, but I think that people are starting to get exhausted in a way because they're like, well, when is this stuff going to be over, right? Mm-hmm. So my question is, how can those of us who have things to lose, but also navigate and move in the world, right? We move in this world. Like, how can we use our art and still, and still be fighting for the cause, like the social, you know what I mean?
I do, and it's Dr. Bettina Love, who is an amazing woman, researcher. I heard her speak a couple months ago to a group of educators where we're talking about the social justice, anti-racism, anti-Blackness moment. And she basically said to this national group of educators, no one brought us here to fight racism. And I feel that way about Black, BIPOC, any sort of underrepresented artists in classical music. I didn't go to Peabody to come and fight racism. Karen, you probably didn't start singing to fight racism. Dubois, you know, but it's a thing that we are being called to do because of exactly what you were talking about, that our industry has not always been as forward thinking on these topics. So I think it goes back to what I was saying before about relative power. There is relative power that I have at my institution or with other institutions that I work with because of where I am at my career, and there are things that I can say. And right now, one of the ways that I personally have been working to kind of use that power is just to protect my coworkers, protect my colleagues, protect my friends who might not feel they have that much power. So I can say the words in the Facebook Live for Urban Arias that other people might not be able to say, and Carolyn and Bob and other leaders are able to hear it. So I think it's, again, going back to whatever your unique talents, whatever your unique position privilege is, and just using that, and just knowing that if you're working with someone who is not going to appreciate that or is going to punish you for doing that, for wanting people to understand your humanity, that might not be the organization you need to work with.
Mm-hmm. Whitney, would you like to add? We'd love to hear from you on that question as well.
I mean, I've just been sitting here just overwhelmed with emotion. You know, you guys are all creatives in your day's work. I'm a lawyer and political strategist, you know, so I don't have the luxury of working within the arts. I'm a former professional dancer, so the arts are, you know, and I love theater. I mean, I love the arts. It's very important to me personally, but it's not where my day job is. And so there's so much that you guys have said, you know. I just think that I've written some things down a little bit because I'm so overwhelmed with the honesty and the authenticity and the power. I think that there are so many things that you guys have talked about. You know, Roberta and Susan's relationship is so key, and I'll probably go back to this when, you know, I'm answering some of the questions that are asked specifically of me. But, you know, Karen and Jennifer talked a lot about the what you do as the person of color, as the BIPOC, but, you know, there's a lot that we need to be talking about what white people need to do. Because that's really the issue, right? Like, we're asking white people to give up comfort and privilege. And so that means, number one, not everybody's going to want to do that. So what are those of you who identify or present as white, what are you willing to do to make up for those of you who are not comfortable giving up privilege? So, you know, but I think that it starts with those types of collaborations, right? Like, Roberta and Susan are clearly exceptional women in their own right, but they're also friends, and they care about one another, and they love one another, and they love one another's families. And so, you know, it starts with those types of collaborations that aren't just based on happenstance. But, you know, the first thing that I always suggest to white people is, you know, just in general, when they ask about on their journey of anti-racism, but like, who are your friends? Who are your children's friends? Like not friends in some way that like, oh, you're like, oh, but my best friend in 8th grade was Black, so I get it. But like, you know, when you're actively using your gifts to child, like, that's an ally. Like that, like, what are you doing in that in that type of way? So, you know, I think that that's really critical to the story. It's not just what people of color are doing, but what is absolutely critical is what are white people doing to destroy white supremacy and dismantle it. And it's a pleasure to be, you know, on this virtual stage with those of you who are Black and those of you who are not Black, who were all on none of us came to this to do anti-racism, but here we are anyway doing it. I do want to say that Dubois said something that really resonated with me about, he's like, this story is about, you know, your mama, your auntie, this story is about me. My elder son, my firstborn is a 15-year-old. He's, you know, getting his driver's license within weeks. And so I have not seen this, but this resonates with me. And, you know, Roberta had said, I think it was like, really, does a singer get to sing her own words? I think it was something like that. That was just really poetic to me. but rarely does a Black woman get to hear her own story. And that's what you guys are providing for me and for my family and for the world to see. You know, I say a lot in my activism, you know, when I talk about different things, there is not one white woman who loves her sons more than I love mine. Trust me. There is not one single solitary white woman that loves her boys more than I love mine. And the fact that what you guys are offering to the world is that vantage point. And, you know, you talked about the worry about, Karen talked about it, I think, about the worry about the Black trauma, which exists. But to me, from what I hear, again, can't wait to see it, but it is certainly about Black trauma, but it's also about Black love. And it's also about love in general. And there's nothing for any of us who happen to be mothers. I can certainly say that my children are my joy, and there's nothing more powerful than the love of a mother for her children. And the fact that you're offering that in the lens of a Black American, but it will speak to all mothers and anyone who has a mother. Like, it's a really powerful story, and it just happens to be through the lens of a Black American. So I'm just throwing out words because I'm just so excited and so happy to be here. But I hope I answered whatever was asked of me, because this is just wonderful. It's important.
Roberta, yes, unmute.
Yes. I want to speak to what Whitney just said about what are the white people going to do. And I know when we first workshopped this piece, there were a couple of people who had been excited about it and did not realize that Susan was white. And when they realized Susan was white, they were very negative about the piece. And I don't know, I won't go there with that particular attitude, but there are people who won't feel that this is a story that can be told by someone white. And someone else in an interview asked me, well, how did you put these words into Susan's hands? And I said, because I trust Susan and I know her heart. And I think we all know in this world, there are a lot of bad hearts out there, but white or Black, you've got to look beyond that color and see what's inside. And Susan was as passionate about telling this story as I am. So you don't have to, as you're saying, you don't have to be Black to get this. And you don't have to be Black to help create it either, because it's a real signal of understanding that you want to be part of this creation, that Susan wanted to be part of this creation. So I appreciate what you said, Whitney.
Thank you. And I mean, just even, I am just in such awe of you, Roberta. I mean, just awe. But to your point, you know, when I try to explain that to people, there are people that I've had to work against in systems of inequity in Arlington who are Black or people of color, right? You know, all kinfolk ain't kinfolk, I think it goes. You know, just because someone represents you or looks like you doesn't mean that they have the good of your people or your passion for Black people or brown people in general. And to me, you know, we talk about it as civil rights, but really it's just human rights. It's all just human rights. It's all just human dignity and, you know, the lived experience of being a human being at the same time as other people on this earth. And so I think that if you can dig deep into that, into your shared humanity, it doesn't really matter whether you're a male or a female, whether you're cisgendered or not, whether you're able-bodied or not, whether you're Black or you're white. It's really about being able to dig deep into the common experience as being a human being, which is why the arts oftentimes is really good at doing that in ways that other industries are less so. So I do think that that's a good point, that the color of someone's skin doesn't necessarily tell you exactly what that person's heart is like. And those are the types of things that we need to be really looking at more so than melanin or lack thereof.
I'd just like to jump in here and say that is exactly why these kinds of stories lend themselves or benefit, or what we all collectively do, sing, dance, write, conduct, administrate, what we all do with music and bodies and space is, for me, the most direct way to strike somebody's empathy beyond what their eyes or what their history or whatever package of stuff they bring with them into the space where they are receiving this and experiencing this, that when you add music, movement, and directing the eyes so that people see what you ask them to see, which you can do either on a stage or with a film, that is the most powerful way to engage people's empathy. And that's what's in it for me. Period, the end.
Yeah, Susan, I'm glad you said that. I've really been struggling with that a little bit, that idea, because I think sometimes an arts audience is able to compartmentalize. So yes, the story that they see on the stage, that piece that's played by that person doesn't look like them, that film that they watch, yes, it can be a story about like universal truths that the art introduces them to, but then they go outside. And then they go to their neighborhood where they might not live near anyone who looks like them. They might go to a store. They might interact with people in public transportation. And the things that they are lauding Karen for, lauding Dubois for, or lauding Roberta for on stage that's not the way that they treat people outside of those spaces. So I still do believe that like the arts has this way of helping and, bringing the best out of people. But I'm really struggling lately on how we kind of separate those worlds, and how people don't necessarily see people with the same humanity outside of the concert hall that they do inside.
I totally hear you about that. I totally hear you. And that's true, probably always has been true, and maybe always will be true. But one of the conversations, we had so many conversations, Roberta and I, about this, was by making something tiny and cheap and portable, we hope that it will, pop up is too strong a word, but we hope that it will be done in places that people don't anticipate it being done. So that you might suddenly find yourself, not in a shopping mall necessarily, but in a place that you wouldn't think that you were going to hear an opera, or the people around you might not think they were going to hear an opera, but that a musical life is being lived in front of you, or a life is being lived musically in front of you, which maybe if the opera can be brought out of the concert hall and the opera room into more common areas where people share space. We hope for that. We hope that some folks will try and do that. I mean, yes, everything you say is absolutely true, but to come down to what we all do, which is make opera, make things for people to imbibe. We hope.
Yeah, so that's a question, it is one thing to tell these stories, to shine light on these stories, to show the connections between being a Black person in America and being a mother of any color, that there's a shared experience there. But then, how can we take it to the next step? And maybe we're running out of time to talk, to really get into this, but I think this is the next step that we need to be talking about in the art world, in the opera world. Everybody, well, not everybody maybe, but the vast majority of people in our industry, I think, are on board with widening the canon. Let's tell more stories. Let's get more voices at the top, to really get equity of experience on our stages. But Jennifer's point of then getting the audience to go away from applauding in the opera house into really taking it into their lives and allowing it to change them as a person. what are ways that we can do that? I'm kind of going off our script here a little bit, but several of you sent questions along those lines. Jennifer's question to Whitney that I think we've already kind of, we're starting down that road, but do you want to read it? Do you want to read your question? Not you.
Yeah, I can do that. As soon as I find it, there it is. So, Whitney, this week especially, I'm thinking about Makia Bryant, and I'm thinking about Andrew Brown Jr. and Adam Toledo and Dante Wright. And right now, as my previous comment to Susan kind of alludes, it's really hard for me to think of the way that classical music or opera is working to really lessen this epidemic of extrajudicial murders. But I would like to know from you as a parent of Black babies, an activist, a community activist, what role do we in the arts and, again, just as individuals, what role do we have to play in keeping our Black boys and girls and people safe?
I mean, I covered it a little bit, but the most succinct answer is we start here. We're doing that right now. And, it's timely. Human rights should always be timely and should have always been timely, but it's certainly not too late to ever start. And that's what these conversations are doing. I think for Black people and other BIPOC, other people of color, I think self-care is huge. It's one of the reasons, to be perfectly honest, why I'm somewhere surrounded by other brown people, because it would be impossible for me to do the anti-racism work that I do without being able to make sure that I'm taking care of my first, even before we were all wearing face masks, we all flew on planes, and the thing that they say is put your own mask on first, right? You have to protect yourself to be able to protect others. So for those of us who are fighting the fight, whether we knew we were part of it or not, really make sure that you're doing the self-care so that you don't get burned out from it, because we're still so vital in the fight for people of color, for white people. You have to be intentional. It has to be intentional. You have to wake up every day and think intentionally, what are you doing to combat systemic racism? And will you be the problem? Sometimes, of course you will, because you're white. It's just like men are the problem in sexism, and able-bodied or the problem with disability. It is what it is. But whatever privilege, to your point, Jennifer, that you made earlier, whatever your unique privilege is, use it for those who don't have it. And if you are not doing it, then you are part of the problem. And you may be comfortable with that, and that's fine, but I find my role as an activist to make sure that until Black children, Black mothers, Black families are comfortable, nobody is going to be comfortable. So that's what we do. We start with these conversations. We start with the discomfort in having these that a lot of white people face, and we stop caring about their discomfort and their shock, and they're unable to believe. Like in 2020, it was okay to be shocked, but we've moved past that. And I don't want to hear about any white person being shocked about any of it. I'm done. So we just start there. We move past and white fragility, and we treat them like tantrums of 3-year-olds. And we start celebrating Black excellence, which I have absolutely no doubt that this will do. We recognize Black trauma, but we certainly recognize Black joy and Black excellence and Black love. And we take it day by day and step by step.
I could not think of a more perfect way to end our conversation. This has been so meaningful. It is just the beginning, I think, of conversations we will have at UrbanArias about the work we do in the opera world in general, and in all of our lives specifically. Whitney, I can attest that this film is a beacon of Black excellence. It is triumph and beauty and love, as you said. It is a story about love. And as Dubois said in one of his interviews, how do we love our children? How do Black parents love their Black children in this world? And then the question for us is, how do we keep doing the work that will make it a better world for these beautiful, beautiful brown boys and girls to grow up into? That's a line from the opera. Thank you all so much. This has just been an incredible pleasure. We've had a few people watching us on Facebook. This will be available on our Facebook page for quite some time. So please, if you missed part of it, tune in and see the whole thing. It's been really an amazing conversation. Does anyone have any closing remarks they want to say before I just give my gratitude to all of you?
I would just like to join Anne Carolyn in her thanks to all of you for creating this project and for participating in this panel. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Streaming begins on Friday evening. Also, please be on the lookout for information from us at UrbanArias about how you can support Black Parents of Arlington and Arlington for Justice, organizations that we look forward to working with more over the coming months and years. I'm proud to know all of you. I'm someone who says I love you, so I'm going to say I love you. And big hugs to everyone. And thank you so much. We will see you online at the opera on Friday night. Bye. Guys, that was amazing.
Amazing.
Great.
Thank you so much for having me.
Whitney,
I feel like I'm an I love you person too. I'm like, I love everybody here. From like the first moment, I'm pixelating again. I don't care. I love everybody here. Everybody. I love all of you. I love it. I love you. I love you so much. Thank you.
Thanks, Whitney. It was great to meet you.
well, have a wonderful time. How long are you in Colombia?
You'll laugh. So I'm working here because I do travel and cultural experiences. But my last client leaves Friday. I leave Saturday. I'm going for 5 days to a yoga retreat in Tulum.
Oh, nice.
That's my birthday present to myself, because everyone's like, but you're on vacation. I'm like, I'm actually just in a vacation locale, not vacationing.
That's very opera. What
So
you're doing,
I will.
actually. It is very much an opera singer
Actually,
thing.
yes.
It's like travel to an amazing city and you never see it because you're in rehearsal or you're in your hotel room protecting your voice. So yeah.
Oh, wow, that makes sense. So yeah, so that's what I'm doing. But I come home the day before Mother's Day because I will have been gone for 3 weeks, and it is absolutely vital for me. This particular Mother's Day, there's some I'm like, what I need is not you, but this particular Mother's Day, what I need is to be around my beautiful boys and my husband and our cat. So I come back on May 8th to the States.
Wonderful.
Awesome.
I just have to say, my birthday present to myself was, where am I going to get carry out? So I need to take some lessons.
Step up your game.
Yeah.
Put on your mask first.
Yeah.
It is, yeah. When my days are spent pushing white people about their frailty, and like I need
You've earned it. You've earned it.
Self-care is important right now. I need it. Like, I'm looking forward to it very much so.
Yep. Well, that is amazing. Thank you, guys.
Well, I want to say one quick thing, in that I hope Friday is a big success for those of you who created the film, and we'll be watching, but I just want to say congratulations and good luck, or toi for Friday night.
Thank you.
And Susan and Roberta, I'm glad that I could finally connect with you in some way on this piece. So, I'm really excited to see the film, and I know will continue. It'll continue.
It's nice to finally meet you, sort of.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, excellent. I hope to see many of you Friday evening at the Waist High Black Tie premiere event, which will be lots of fun.
Yeah.
And take care, everybody.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Susan. Bye, Roberta. Bye, Dubois.
Bye, everyone.
Hi, Karen.
Here at UrbanArias, we pride ourselves on timely and relevant offerings. That's why.